Herman Hesse, If the War Goes On. Herman Hesse was born in Germany at Kaul, Württemberg on the 2nd of July 1877. He began his career as a bookseller and started to write and publish poetry at the age of 21. 5 years later, he enjoyed his first major success with his novels on youth and educational problems. First, Peter Kamenzind, 1904, then The Prodigy, 1905, followed by Gertrude, 1910, Roshold, 1914, Nulp, 1915, and Demian, 1919. Later, when, as a protest against German militarism in the First World War, he settled permanently in Switzerland, he established himself as one of the greatest literary figures of the German-speaking world. Hesse's deep humanity and searching philosophy were further developed in such masterly novels as Siddhartha, 1922, Steppenwolf, 1927, and Narziss and Goldmund, 1930, which together with his poems and a number of critical works won him a leading place among contemporary thinkers. In 1946, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Herman Hesse died in 1962, shortly after his 85th birthday. To a Cabinet Minister, August 1917. This evening, after a hard day's work, I asked my wife to play me a Beethoven sonata. With its angelic voices, the music recalled me from bustle and worry to the real world, to the one reality which we possess, which gives us joy and torment, the reality in which and for which we live. Afterwards, I read a few lines in the book containing the Sermon on the Mount and the sublime, age-old and fundamental words, "Thou shalt not kill." But I found no peace. I could neither go to bed nor continue reading. I was filled with anxiety and unrest, and suddenly, Herr Minister, as I was searching my mind for their cause, I remembered a few sentences from one of your speeches that I read a few days ago. Your speech was well constructed, otherwise it was not particularly original, significant, or provocative. Reduced to the essentials, it said roughly what government officials have been saying in their speeches for a long time, that, generally speaking, we long for nothing so fervently as peace, as a new understanding among nations and fruitful collaboration in building the future, that we wish neither to enrich ourselves nor to satisfy homicidal lusts, but that the time for negotiations is not yet at hand, and that for the present there is therefore no alternative but to go on bravely waging war. Just about every minister of any of the belligerent nations might have made such a speech, and probably will tomorrow or the day after. If tonight your speech keeps me awake, although I have read many similar speeches with the same dreary conclusion and slept soundly afterwards, the fault, as I am now certain, lies with Beethoven's sonata, and with that ancient book in which I afterwards read, that book which contains the wonderful commandments of Mount Sinai and the luminous words of the Saviour. Beethoven's music and the words of the Bible told me exactly the same thing. They were water from the same spring, the only spring from which man derives good. And then suddenly, Herr Minister, it came to me that your speech and the speeches of your governing colleagues in both camps do not flow from that spring, that they lack what can make human words important and valuable. They lack love. They lack humanity. Your speech shows a profound feeling of concern and responsibility for your people, its army, and its honour, but it shows no feeling for mankind, and, to put it bluntly, it implies hundreds of thousands more human sacrifices. Perhaps you will call my reference to Beethoven sentimentality. I imagine, though, that you feel a certain respect for the commandments and for the sayings of Jesus, at least in public. But if you believe in a single one of the ideals for which you are waging war, the freedom of nations, freedom of the seas, social progress, or the rights of small countries, if you truly in your heart of hearts believe in a single one of these generous ideals, you'll have to recognize on reading your speech that it does not serve that ideal or any other. It is not the expression and the product of a faith, of any awareness of a human need, but, alas, the expression and product of a dilemma. An understandable dilemma, to be sure, for what could be more difficult at the present time than to acknowledge a certain disappointment with the course of the war and to start looking for the shortest way to peace. But such a dilemma, even if it is shared by 10 governments, cannot endure forever. Dilemmas are solved by necessities. One day it will become necessary for you and your enemy colleagues to face up to your dilemma and make decisions that will put an end to it. The belligerents of both camps have long been disappointed with the course of the war. Regardless of who has won this battle or that battle, regardless of how much territory or how many prisoners have been taken or lost, the result has not been what one expects in a war. There has been no solution, no decision, and none is in sight. You made your speech in order to hide this great dilemma from yourself and your people, in order to postpone vital decisions, which always calls for sacrifices. And other government officials make their speeches for the same reason, which is understandable. It is easier for a revolutionary or even for a writer to see the human factor in a political situation and draw the proper inferences than for a responsible statesman. It is easier for one of us because he is under no obligation to feel personally responsible for the deep gloom that comes over a nation when it sees that it has not achieved its war aim and that many thousands of human lives and billions in wealth may well have been sacrificed in vain. But that is not the only reason why it is harder for you to recognize the dilemma and make decisions that will put an end to the war. You smile, or perhaps you will say that you as a private citizen feel very close to Beethoven and to all that is noble and beautiful. And maybe you do. But my heartfelt wish is that one of these days, chancing to hear a piece of sublime music, you should suddenly recapture an awareness of those voices that well from a sacred spring. I wish that one of these days, in a quiet moment, you would read a parable of Jesus, a line of Goethe, or a saying of Lao Tzu. That moment might be infinitely important to the world. You might find inner liberation. Your eyes and ears might suddenly be opened. For many years, Herr Minister, your eyes and ears have been attuned to theoretical aims rather than reality. They have long been accustomed, necessarily so, to close themselves to much of what constitutes reality, to disregard it, to deny its existence. Do you know what I mean? Yes, you know. But perhaps the voice of a great poet, the voice of the Bible, the eternal voice of humanity that speaks clearly to us from art, would give you the power of true sight and hearing. What things you would see and hear. Nothing more about the labour shortage and the price of coal, nothing more about tonnages and alliances, loans, troop levies, and all the rest of what you have hitherto regarded as the sole reality. Instead, you would see the earth, our patient old earth, so littered with the dead and dying, so ravaged and shattered, so charred and desecrated. You would see soldiers lying for days in no man's land, unable with their mutilated hands to shoo the flies from their mortal wounds. You would hear the voices of the wounded, the screams of the mad, the accusing plaints of mothers and fathers, sweethearts and sisters. the people's cry of hunger.
When I fought under Terrell, I was just talking. He wouldn't call me my name. When I turned Islamic, I gave up the name of Cassius Clay for Muhammad Ali. So he wouldn't call me that. He says, "You're Cassius Clay. I'm not calling you Muhammad Ali, and you're gonna stay Cassius Clay." I said, "You gonna call me Muhammad Ali, sucker?" And during the fight, I kept saying, "What's my name?" And I tell you, you gonna call me my name? I said, "What's my name?" He said, "Cassius Clay. Your name is Cassius Clay." Kept hitting. I said, "What's my?" He kept saying, "Cassius Clay." And by round 7, I said, "What's my name?" He said, "Muhammad Ali, Muhammad Ali, Muhammad Ali."
All the things for which you are now prolonging the war, and, if need be, your minister's portfolio with them. And you would do what mankind in untold fear and torment is hoping and praying you will do. You would be the first among governing statesmen to condemn this wretched war, the first to tell his fellows what all feel secretly even now, that 6 months or even 1 month of war costs more than what anything it can achieve is worth. If that were to happen, Herr Minister, your name would never be forgotten. Your deed would stand higher in the eyes of mankind than the deeds of all those who have ever waged victorious wars. Shall There Be Peace? December 1917. Only recently, Wilson and Lloyd George proclaimed their unswerving will to fight on until final victory. In the Italian chamber, the socialist Megari was treated like a madman because he had spoken a few natural human words. And today, with what wooden self-righteousness a Wolf Dispatch denies the rumour of a new German peace proposal. Germany and its allies have not the slightest reason for repeating their magnanimous offer of peace. In other words, everything goes on as before, and if anywhere a peaceful blade of grass tries to pierce the ground, a military boot is quick to trample it. Yet at the same time we read that peace negotiations have begun in Brest-Litovsk, that Herr Quinlan has opened the session with a reference to the significance of Christmas and has spoken in the words of the gospel of peace on earth. If he means what he says, if he has even the faintest understanding of those tremendous words,
peace is inevitable.
Unfortunately, our experience of Bible quotations in the mouths of statesmen has not thus far been encouraging. For many days now, the eyes of the world have been focused upon 2 places. In those 2 places, it is widely felt the destinies of nations are coming to a head, the future beckoning and disaster threatening. With bated breath, the world is looking eastward to the peace negotiations in Brest-Litovsk, and at the same time it is watching the Western Front in dire anguish, for everyone feels, everyone knows that, short of a miracle, the most dreadful disaster that has ever befallen men is there impending. The bitterest, bloodiest, most ruthless and appalling battle of all time. Everyone knows it, and everyone, with the exception of a few sanguine political orators and war profiteers, is trembling at the thought. Concerning the outcome of this mass slaughter, opinions and hopes vary. In both camps there is a minority who seriously believe in a decisive victory, but one thing that no one endowed with a vestige of good sense can believe is that the ideal humanitarian aims which figure so prominently in the speeches of all our statesmen will be achieved. The bigger, the bloodier, the more destructive these final battles of the World War prove to be, the less will be accomplished for the future. The less hope there will be of appeasing hatreds and rivalries, or of doing away with the idea that political aims can be attained by the criminal instrumentality of war. If one camp should indeed achieve final victory, and this purpose is the one justification offered by the leaders in their incendiary speeches, then what we abhor as militarism will have won out. If in their secret heart the partisans of war mean so much as a single word of what they have been saying about war aims, the absurdity, the utter futility of all their arguments staggers the imagination. Can a new massacre of inconceivable scope be justified by such a jumble of hopeless fallacies, of mutually contradictory hopes and plans, while all peoples with even the slightest experience of war and its suffering are awaiting the outcome of the Russian peace negotiations in prayer and expectation, while all of us are moved to love and gratitude for the Russians because they, first among nations, have attacked the war at its root and resolved to end it, while half the world is going hungry and useful human effort has been halved where it has not ceased altogether. At such a time, preparations are being made in France for what we shudder even to name, a mass slaughter which is expected to decide, but will not decide, the outcome of the war. For the final senseless mustering of heroism and patience, the final hideous triumph of dynamite and machines over human life and the human spirit. In view of this situation, it is our duty, the one sacred duty of every man of goodwill on earth, not to sheathe ourselves in indifference and let things take their course, but to do our utmost to prevent this final catastrophe. Yes, you say, but what can we do? If we were statesmen and ministers, we would do our bit, but as it is, we have no power. This is the easy reaction to all responsibility, until it becomes too pressing. If we turn to the politicians and leaders, they too shake their heads and invoke their helplessness. We cannot sit back and put the blame on them. To blame are the inertia and cowardice of each one of us, our obstinacy and reluctance to think. In response to the excellent Murgari, Sonnino refused to say anything that might give aid and comfort to the enemy. The Wolf dispatch I have just mentioned declares that Germany has not the slightest reason to make another move on behalf of peace. But every day we ourselves give evidence of the same attitude. We accept things as they come. We rejoice in victories. We deplore the losses in our own camp. We tacitly accept war as an instrument of politics. Alas, every nation and every family, every single individual in all Europe and far beyond it has more than enough reason to give his utmost on behalf of the peace for which we all yearn. Only a vanishing minority of men truly want the war to go on, and beyond a doubt they deserve our contempt and sincerest hatred. No one else, only a few, very few morbid fanatics or unscrupulous criminals are in favour of this war, and yet, inconceivable as it seems, it goes on and on, with both sides arming indefatigably for the allegedly final Holocaust in the West. This is possibly only because we are all too lazy, too easygoing, too cowardly. It is possible only because somewhere in our secret hearts we approve or tolerate the war, because we throw all the resources of our minds and souls to the winds and let the misguided machines roll on. That is what the political leaders do and what the armies do. But we ourselves, the onlookers, are no better. We all know that we can stop the war if we want to in earnest. We know that whenever men have felt an action to be truly necessary, they have performed it against all resistance. We have looked on with admiration and beating hearts as the Russians laid down their arms and manifested their will to make peace. But at the same moment, we reject the obligation such feelings imply. Every politician in the world is all in favour of revolution, reason, and the laying down of arms, but only in the enemy camp, not in his own. If we are in earnest, we can stop the war. Why do parliaments and cabinets everywhere content themselves with the same dreary drivel, the same day-to-day trivialities? Why do they nowhere rise up to champion a great idea, the only idea that matters today? Why do they favour the self-determination of nations only when they themselves hope to profit? Why are people still taken in by the false idealism of official phrasemongers? It has been said that every nation has the rulers it wants and deserves. Maybe so. We Europeans, at all events, have the bloodiest and most ruthless of all rulers, war. Is that what we want and deserve? No, we don't want it. We all want the opposite. Apart from a small number of profiteers, no one wants this shameful and dismal state of affairs. What then can we do? We can bestir ourselves. We can take every opportunity to manifest our readiness for peace. We can desist from such useless provocations as the above-mentioned Wolf dispatch, and stop talking like Sonnino. At the present juncture, a slight humiliation, a concession, a human impulse can do us no harm. How, when we have befouled ourselves so thoroughly with blood, can we worry about petty national vanities? Now is the time to oust those statesmen who conceive foreign policy in terms of self-seeking national programs, who ignore the cry of mankind. Why wait until their stupidity has shed the blood of more millions? All of us, great and small, belligerents and neutrals, we must not close our ears to the dire warning of this hour, the threat of such unthinkable horrors. Peace is at hand, as a thought, a desire, a suggestion, as a power working in silence. It is everywhere, in every heart. If each one of us opens his heart to it, if each one of us firmly resolves to serve the cause of peace, to communicate his thoughts and intimations of peace, if every man of good will decides to devote himself exclusively for a little while to clearing away the obstacles, the barriers to peace, then we shall have peace. Herman Hesse, 1917. Shall there be peace? The end.